Welcome to the ParentNet podcast by Focus on the Family Singapore. In each episode, we'll be speaking with everyday parents and practitioners as they share with us gems from their parenthood journey. Keep tuning in to learn with us as we figure it out together.
Hello everyone and welcome to the ParentNet podcast. My name is EJ and I am your host for this episode. Many of us are familiar with exam stress. We faced it ourselves as children, and now we have to deal with the meltdowns and big emotions of our school-going kids. In this episode of our Parent Podcast, we will be chatting about the importance of emotional intelligence, in short we call it EQ, and how it is a secret tool probably for many parents that we can tap on to use to manage our children's stress and anxiety levels. Today, I'm very excited to welcome Jasmine Lu on our ParentNet podcast. She's a mom of 2 kids and a parent coach who specializes in the area of emotional intelligence. Jasmine also hosts her own podcast channel called The Experimental Parent. So welcome to the ParentNet podcast, Jasmine.
Hi, EJ. Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much for being here with us. So I'll let you have the very first word with all our audience. Could you tell us a little bit more about yourself? A fun fact maybe?
Hi, everyone out there listening. I'm not sure if this is fun, but a little bit more about myself would be that my childhood dream, my childhood ambition was really to be a mother. And I meant like to do nothing else, just purely be a mother. And I imagined it to be a very beautiful setting. I'll be a mom that never loses her temper, have a lot of children running around her, skipping about. Yeah, but reality couldn't be further from the truth, which was also why I started that in-depth study and practice and research into EQ. So by profession, I am a coach, I am a trainer, I'm an educator. So I use EQ in that aspect. But in my passions, like you said, I created that podcast channel, The Experimental Parent. So it's spelled EQ-X Paramental. So it's about parenting with EQ. I also am in the midst of publishing 3 books on helping our young children manage their big emotions. And I also give talks and I speak about this topic because it's something very dear to my heart. So yeah, it's a nice byproduct of my childhood aspiration, what I'm doing now.
Wow. Yeah. And would it be okay to tell us how old are your children now?
They are 4 and 2. So the younger one's turning 2 in 2 months' time. So I'm nowhere near the exam stress yet, but the meltdowns part definitely can relate.
I'm very sure today what you share with us will be very helpful to our listeners on how to manage the emotions that our children are facing. Using exam as an example, but I'm sure it's applicable for everyday living with
Absolutely.
Our kids too. So to help set the stage for our conversation today, Jasmine, I probably will need you to explain and share with us what actually is EQ, emotional intelligence. How do you define it? And maybe why is it so important for an everyday parent like all of us?
I think we're not unfamiliar with this term, right? We hear EQ being used a lot. It's a very widely used and also loosely used term. We use it to describe people who are very good at socializing or who never offend people. And we say, oh, this person has very high EQ. But actually, it's a lot more than that. It does encompass that to some extent, but more than that. So to put it very simply for everyone's easy reference, emotional intelligence is simply being intelligent with your emotions. And that requires you to have very high self-awareness. So self-awareness is a key domain of EQ. It requires you to be able to self-regulate, so emotional regulation, social awareness, being able to read the mood of the room, showing empathy, and relationship management. How do we harness the emotions of others and help them manage emotions? It's like the soft skill that underpins all the soft skills. And the good news is EQ is learned and it's also learnable. Think of it as, those inbuilt apps in your phone that you cannot delete one. It's in there, right? Yeah, but that's the thing about EQ. It's in there. It's just like IQ, right? It's in there. We all have it. It's just how much we practice and hone it. So the more we practice it, the better we get at EQ.
I love what you mentioned, Jasmine, and I think there's really hope for all of us because you said EQ is learned and is learnable.
Absolutely.
And it's an ongoing process for all of us. I guess whether you are a parent or you are a worker in the office, a colleague to someone, family members, we all need to learn about EQ.
Yes.
And it can help us to better manage our relationships, interaction with people as well, right?
Definitely.
So today's episode, we're going to specifically talk about the topic of EQ with kids and specifically into exams. And I guess many of the parents, if you're listening in, your children has begun the new year and coming up soon is exams. Or in schools, they call it WA, semestral exams. So Jasmine, when it comes to examinations for kids in school, how would understanding emotions come in handy in helping our children manage or better manage stress and to do well?
Yeah, very handy actually. So stress management actually also encompasses a lot of EQ aspects. So what are the triggers to our stress? What do our stress reactions tend to be like? Then only can we apply the appropriate coping techniques for it. And stress is appraised differently by different people, right? Some of us just have a different threshold of stress to others. And it could be also influenced by our life experiences, our brain patterns, how we tend to fall back on a certain stimulus, our common responses. So remember I mentioned one of the domains of EQ is self-awareness. So that bit actually is critical for us to know what exactly is causing us those stress, for our children to understand what is causing them stress. What are the factors that are affecting it? What is the stress or those emotions when they feel stressed? Trying to tell them about any underlying issues, concerns, feelings, thoughts. Then we can apply the right coping strategies to help them get through it. So in EQ, we call it name it to tame it. So if you are able to name your emotion, it's been scientifically backed that you're more likely able to tame that emotion. Because when you name your emotion, first thing you're going to do is you're actually engaging your logical brain to be back in control. And when you do that, when you say the emotion, your brain, your body receives the signal that you understand what is going on. It will reduce the intensity at which it generates the neurochemicals that make us feel a certain emotion. So if I can say to you right now, EJ, I'm feeling nervous, then naturally, I would not feel as nervous if you're really in tune with your emotions. You won't feel as nervous, and it continues to lower in intensity as we continue conversations around my nervousness, for example. So name it to tame it is highly useful in engaging our children in conversations that gets them to tell us how they feel about something. It also increases their emotional literacy about how they may be feeling about this whole process. When I teach or when I coach, I like to use this framework that I came up with on my own. It's called C.A.L.M framework. First, categorize your emotions. That's the name it to tame it part, right? What is it that I'm feeling? Then A stands for appraise your emotions. So what are those emotions trying to tell me about what the undercurrents that are going through my life? Then L stands for look for options. That's where the growth mindset, the looking outside for the possibilities comes in. And then M stands for move, because emotions move people. So how can we apply the right strategies to move ourselves, our children forward rather than backward or downward was still, right? So C.A.L.M framework helps by getting our children to say all those things, and then we can apply the coping strategies after that.
Wow, name it to tame it.
Yeah.
I think that's a catchy phrase and tagline. And so building up this, what we call like emotions kind of vocabulary is very important to be able to help our children identify, are we feeling sad? And maybe under the sad categories, there is different levels of words that can express it.
Exactly.
Correct, right? So parents, maybe one of the areas that we need to start building on is all the adjectives and the kind of words.
Emotions, vocabulary.
To be able to describe how you're actually feeling and help your child to name it so that we can tame it, as what Jasmine has mentioned. And I love what you mentioned about being calm, the frameworks that you've given, being the child to be calm. I felt that as you were mentioning, it also helps the parent to be calm in our approach or analyzing the situation too. Could you tell me a little bit more how important it is too for us to be able to identify, to read the cues of our kids that they give us when they are feeling stressed? I don't assume every kid, when they are stressed, they show it. Sometimes suppressing it. Are there any signs, symptoms that we should be watchful of? And is it important to watch out for these symptoms too?
You're right, EJ. Not all children are able to adequately express themselves in the face of stress. And the way they behave when they feel stressed also differs child to child, right? So I think our role as parents is absolutely critical here, not just because we're biggest cheerleaders of our kids, but also because depending on how old our children are, this experience of stress may be very unfamiliar and very new to them. So children who are, let's say, going for a first year of WAs, examinations, they might not have experienced this whole process of having to undergo an examination, or they may be new in secondary school, and then that whole competitiveness is a whole different level in our education system as they move up the foundation years, right? So this may be totally unfamiliar to them. This is stress, and all the complicated emotions within it can be totally new, and they may not even have the right words to express because they may not even know what they're going through. And that's where we not just provide the vocabulary for them, but we also help them explore this very complicated emotion, stress. And usually stress is not just made up of one emotion. It's a complex feeling. So it's made up of a lot of uncomfortable emotions, and it's helping our children bring that to the surface and helping them make sense of, oh, okay, when I go through this process, this is how I may feel. And as I grow older in life, I will continue to feel this feeling, right? So it's important now to learn, okay, what are some things I can do to help? And actually, even from a scientific point of view, our children at this stage are not developmentally able to self-regulate. So even if they know they feel a certain way, they may not be able to control and cope with it, because our prefrontal cortex, which is the part of our brain that controls logical thinking, impulse control, it's not fully mature until we are 25, 26 years old. But the amygdala that sits in our limbic system, the emotional processors of our brain, is mature from birth. So they will feel all those emotions, but they won't be able to regulate. And that's why at this point, it needs to be externally regulated by a person or by people whose, prefrontal cortex are a lot more mature, and that is us, the parents, right? So now it's externally regulated with them, and that's why it's called co-regulation. So it's helping them bring those feelings up, and then working together with them to say, hey, come, let's walk through this together. Let's think of concrete ways we can cope with all these feelings so that it makes us feel better and we can get through this very difficult, this unfamiliar, this new process together. But I also want to mention at this point that it's very important as parents that we stay away from prescribing or projecting how we feel on our kids. Right? Let them have the airtime. This is about their feelings. So it should be about them. So the way we talk to them should open up conversations about how they feel and not become like a whole sharing session about, oh, at my time, that's how I did it. I also went through this. It becomes like, wow, it becomes your story and not your child's story. So we have to be mindful of that.
All the listeners, this is really, really important. I must confess that many times as a parent, I fall into this trap as well. While I know that often we have to be like the facilitator to facilitate the emotions, to draw them out, to be able to share, give them the words, to be able to speak and tell their story. We tend to feel like we are rushing for time, only have 15 minutes, and you're feeling like that. And the moment the child just beginning to open up, we jump to conclusion, or we jump in with a listicle of solutions and answer. And soon we probably realize that the child just keeps quiet, back into the cave, which is not helping the situation. So what I hear from Jasmine, you're saying is that, we need to give them time and that space to draw them out. Maybe we need to zip up a little bit just to hear them out. So I'm a concerned parent here already. I said here I can really acknowledge and attest to what you're sharing. And so, like I said, my child is in primary 4, and he probably falls into the category like what you've mentioned. He first time feeling such a heavy level of stress because first time taking WA coming up, and I've noticed that sometimes he doesn't really tells me how he really feels. A lot of times when I ask him, are you worried? Are you stressed? I get a, okay, very limited kind of response. So I need your help, Jasmine, and I think maybe many parents are facing the same thing. How can we, knowing that observably we see that our children seems quite stressed over exams, how do you advise we open up a conversation with our kids who might not be wanting to open up?
You see, EJ, when you asked your son, are you stressed? What possible answers might he have for you?
Yes or no.
Exactly. So you're limiting him to a yes or a no answer. And then after that, if he doesn't share any further, and if his personality or the stage of life that he's going through causes him to not be so expressive, then that's the end of the conversation. So even for the parents who are listening, even for myself, I always slip into the prescriptive moments, the teachable moments where I want to fix things for you, because we're fixers and we can't bear to see our children go through this difficult time. So we want to help them through it by prescribing our wisdom. But it's really important at this exploratory stage, there will be a time where your wisdom will come in handy. But at the beginning, it's really important first to be okay with the silence and to let the children have their airtime. So what would be useful is, first of all, telling ourselves to be genuinely curious. So genuinely curious. I really want to know how he's feeling, and this isn't going to become a stage for me to share my wisdom again. I'm genuinely curious, and therefore we have to ask open-ended questions. And we can ask them using what I call TFA, so thoughts, feelings, actions. For example, you can say that you observe something and then ask them. So, you can say, hey boy, I noticed you've been staying up quite late recently, studying. How are you feeling about your exams? Instead of, is it you stress? Switch that to, how might you be feeling? So questions about feelings, right? Or you can say, so your teacher mentioned that the prelims this year is going to be tougher than the actual exams. Do you have any thoughts about that? What are your thoughts about it? So asking them for their thoughts, asking them for their feelings, right? Or if they have already come forward and shared some things, you can then say, I see, okay. What do you think are some things we can do to help you feel better? Or what is one thing you think we can start doing this week that can help you in this particular subject? So you see, it's open-ended. When you ask like that, they have to give you how they genuinely feel, their thought process, instead of I'm okay, yeah, or I'm fine. Then go to the room, then end the conversation, right? So curious, use the think, feel, act kind of mentality to ask open-ended questions about how they feel. What are your thoughts? What are your feelings about it? Would you like to share more? Would you like to tell me what's on your mind? And very important, the third thing is we must validate their feelings. So don't dismiss them. Don't say, this one, no big deal one. This one, easy one. If the moment we share how we think or how we feel about it, then the ball transfers to us. It becomes our airtime. Then our children, like you mentioned just now, may just go back into the shell. It's like, okay, Lord, then you talk, I'm done talking already, right? So you talk, right? So validate it. It's their feelings. They have a right to say it. So they own it. It's their feelings. They have every right to express it. And we have every honor to validate them and to acknowledge those feelings as real. And I think down the conversation, as we progress, as they share more about their thoughts and they explore more, then we can come in with if they are open and they want to know, actually, Daddy, what do you think I can do? I'm not really sure because this is totally new. I don't even know how I'm feeling. Then that's the opportunity for you, because you're getting the signal from him that he wishes to find out more from you. Then that's your space to share.
Wow, these are nuggets of wisdom. They are really practical and useful. And I must say that it probably is not natural for many of us, like the steps that you've mentioned about pulling back first, allowing the child to speak and us not being too quick to jump in. Maybe in that Asian culture that we grew up with, it's not very usual. I think I can concur with Jasmine that a lot of times this takes a lot of practice. We don't always get it right. It will feel a bit awkward for our internal systems.
Absolutely, yes.
This is also a shout out of encouragement for all parents. If you plan to try this, and we highly recommend you to try what Jasmine has mentioned, validating our kids' emotion, hearing them out, how they feel. It will feel strange for you, unnatural, but it's a new way of learning. It's something that's helpful. So the more we practice, we will feel more confident, comfortable with the approach.
Of course. Well. I just wanted to add, because the children that we are interacting with are all different. We cannot assume that, if we ask this, that they will pour out like mountain load of their own feelings. And sometimes for parents with children who are less expressive, you might hit a silence. And so it's also normal. It's okay for us to just sit in that silence for a bit. But while we're doing that, we observe our children's body language. Sometimes it's about what they say and also what they don't say. And that's okay. If our children are they're still digesting what you're asking, but at least they're still sitting with you, right? And you can tell that they're trying to internalize it. Give them the space to internalize it. Like you said, it's not always natural, and our children all react differently to the way we ask them. So it's practice. It's about trying different ways to ask, but always try to keep it open-ended. Give them the opportunity to say what they want to say. As long as it's down that trajectory, I think we're good.
So for all parents, you are just like me as well, a problem solver trying to fix everything. Maybe we need to, put a pause on that. We're not trying to fix our child, honestly. We're trying to facilitate a conversation here to better understand what they are going through, what really stress means to them. And I want to turn the conversation here a little bit. So I've understand also that a lot of times the difficulty about supporting our children when it comes to exams stems a lot from our own as parents, our fears and our anxieties, maybe sometimes our own expectations that can be at the root of it, our own personal journey growing up relating to exams. So how do you advise parents, what are some ways we can deal with these ourselves first?
Yeah, you're absolutely right, AJ. When you say actually, sometimes the stress that we think surrounds this whole exam topic or this whole exam period comes more from us than our children, right? So actually, it's about doing the exact same exercise that we're doing with our kids on ourselves. So again, we need to ask ourselves, remember the C.A.L.M framework? What thoughts and what feelings come up when we think about our children going through exams? And what are those thoughts and feelings possibly telling us about our own motivations, our own insecurities, our own fears? And do they really matter? Say, 50 years from today, so long after exams, our children are all grown and in fact, settling down into retirement almost already, right? What do we envisage our children's ideal life to be? What do we really wish to see our children 50 years down the road? And would it really have so much to do with the exam that they're going through today? So we ask ourselves that to clarify our own goals, our own motivations, our own thoughts and feelings around how we feel and whether we might be projecting some of our own expectations or our own fears or past experiences on our kids. So once I was coaching this mother and she was sharing how she was very concerned about her daughter going through the upcoming national exams in Vietnam. So her daughter, like your son, EJ, is about 10 years old at that time. And at first, at the beginning of the conversation, she shared that a lot of why she's so uptight about it was because she knows her daughter has a lot of untapped potential and she knows she can do it once. She's just lazy and that's why she feels the need to push her a little bit. But as we dug a little bit deeper and we explored deeper into the conversation, she then shared that because as a teacher herself and as an English teacher, if her daughter didn't perform well in the subject that she teaches, it looks bad on her as a teacher. So as she shared more, it's also what society will say, hey, you teach English, then your daughter, the English exam had to retake. Yeah, so she was extremely uptight because the daughter had failed the exam once before. But when she shared that, it became clearer that actually it was her own fears of what people might say as an English teacher of not being able to teach your child a subject that you teach, for your child to excel in that. And as she went on, she shared that, she knows her daughter has a lot of other strengths and it may not be in the field of linguistics. It may not be in the field of English, that path that she's trying to steer her daughter towards. It may not be, but she actually was able to articulate a lot of her daughter's other strengths. And ultimately, she said, of course, if she had done her best, that's really all I wish for. At the end of the day, I know that these strengths that she has will still take her very far. It's really just that part of what society is saying, So I asked her things also about whether this is a narrative that you're painting for yourself or was this really external feedback. So sometimes our own thoughts become our own undoing. Yeah, and in this kind of conversation, when we ask ourselves, actually, what do I really want and why do I feel those ways? Why do I feel those stress? Then it can bring to clarity the root of where our anxieties may come from and what we truly want for our children. And beyond today, we all know as parents, as the biggest cheerleaders of our children, that each of our children all have their own unique strengths. They have their own superpowers, and it may not be in the field of academic studies. It's about knowing this in our children, because if we as the parents don't bring to light our children's strengths, then who will? So we need to bring that not just to everybody else's attention, but more importantly to our own attention and to our children's attention, to let them know that, hey, don't beat yourself up. Some of our kids, they take it very hard on themselves when they cannot conform with the societal pressures, when they feel they're not coping with the system, they compare themselves with their peers. They really get very affected by it. And that's why we got to tell them, hey, you have your own unique superpower and we're here to celebrate it. This is a kind of a necessary process if you are within the system in Singapore. But even if you don't do well here, you definitely have a strength somewhere and we can build on it. It's about teaching our children to be resilient and also to find the best ways to work through this system that they have. So, when we ask ourselves those questions, I think we as parents can deal with our own stresses first before we open up those conversations with our kids.
So important. We first need to manage ourselves first. Right? And Jasmine has rightly mentioned the C.A.L.M framework for ourselves too, about assessing our emotions, managing our expectations. Thank you so much, Jasmine. Now I better know how to manage myself, because I see my son struggling in mathematics and I thought I was really good at mathematics. And I look at my son, how come you're not as good as daddy in mathematics? So, okay, I got to recalibrate and manage my own expectations and use it as an opportunity to open conversations with my son. And I like what Jasmine, you mentioned, the worth and the value of our children. There's beyond the exams, there's beyond the academics as well. So really these things are important, but they don't define our children. And really the best support that we as parents can give to our children is to let them know that they are loved, they are valued, no matter what results that they achieve. And I know listening in, there are many parents, if you're just like me, feeling anxious about our kids' exams, maybe it would be helpful for us as parents to find time and space to regulate our own stress, our own anxieties, first worry, first-time parents going through a first-time exams with our children. There are helpful ways, whether it's deep breathing, whether it's journaling, or speaking with other parents.
Yeah.
Listening to Parent Podcast, I'm sure it will help, to help us to stay calm and be present in a better state of frame of mind when we are supporting our children.
Absolutely.
Jasmine, I really love talking with you and I believe if we continue on, we can talk for many more hours and this is such an interesting topic as well. But time has caught up with us and as I hear you, both of us can be articulating and rattling off it sounds easy, but it takes a lot of practice.
Absolutely.
And so really encourage parents to at least take a first step and give it a try to what Jasmine has mentioned today. So as we close today's podcast, Jasmine, I'm going to give you the last words. Any encouragement to share with our parent listeners?
EJ, I think you really brought up a very important point just now that it is a constant work in progress. It's not like, we can just talk about it and then the next moment, we become masters at conversation and our children become very good at stress management. It's an ongoing process. There will be many more stresses that our children will go through that we can journey with them. So even if we didn't feel quite right this time, that's okay because it's a continuing journey together with them. But ultimately, we have to remind ourselves our children are, I like to say they're like mirrors, but actually a more appropriate description would be they're like sponges, They absorb everything that we project on them and they, squeeze it out, they reflect it. So it's the same with what kind of energy do we want our children to be absorbing from us and squeezing back out? Is it going to be, it's our own insecurities, our own fears that they are absorbing and they're going to learn because they will form patterns and this will become their default stress coping techniques down the road to always crumble under that? Or do we want them to absorb that growth mindset, that courage to fail forward and still seeing the opportunities in it? We want our children to become the best version of ourselves. And how do we help to make that happen? There's this litigator, her name is Maureen Killoran. She once said, stress, it's not what happens to us, it's our response to what happens. And our response is something we can choose. As we journey with our children, and again, it's an ongoing journey, we'll never always get the right answers, but as we journey with them and we help ourselves and them through our own insecurities and fears, we will figure out the best ways to learn about ourselves and then find the right techniques, like you said, whether it's speaking, it's about writing it down, whether it's about talking to people about it, the right techniques to see us through all the way and see them through to adulthood, to many more challenges so that they can become the best versions of themselves.
Indeed, and Jasmine, you have rightly summarized it up for us that parenting is really like a journey. And I hope for all the parents who are listening in, that as you go through this journey, it's full of ups and downs, that it will be an enjoyable journey as you work closely with your children, watch them grow up, fulfilling their potential. We've all heard from Jasmine that parenting is also both a science and an art. We can learn all the sciences from the books that we read, the information. There's that art aspect where we need to practice, that it will be very subjective because every child and how it plays out will be very different as well. So parents, enjoy this journey. There are times of frustration, but never lose hope, never give up. It's going to be a beautiful process and a beautiful journey as you see your child grow up and what you have invested has borne fruits as well. So thank you so much everyone for listening in. We are so privileged to have had Jasmine with us on this episode, and we hope that to all listeners you will continue to enjoy our ParentNet podcast. For more parenting resources, do visit our website at family.org.sg, and as you tune in to this podcast finding it useful, please feel free to share it out with your friends too. So stay connected with us to learn and grow in your parenting journey.